Hey everybody, welcome back to Whiskey Wednesday. I'm Steven.
I'm Wendy.
And this is our episode number 5. And like every other episode, we are going to go ahead and start this off with what we're drinking tonight. So I am going to be drinking 1792 Small Batch. I have always had an affinity for this. Not only is the bottle pretty cool, but the bourbon inside is very nice as well.
And I am doing Blantons, which of course anybody that knows whiskeys knows that they're iconic for their horse stopper. Blantons is a good old favorite in our house. So we definitely like this one.
And unlike the last few weeks, that's a fresh bottle and not an almost dead one. All right, to episode number 5. Cheers.
Cheers.
Away we go.
That's good. Okay, so today we're talking about a lot of controversies that horse people get into. And we've seen this where people will get into very passionate arguments on social media about these particular topics. And so we thought we'd kind of touch on some of these topics. As a horse rescue, of course, we're small, but, you can have anywhere from a dozen to several hundred horses at a rescue. And every horse is different and every horse has its own unique situation. So not every horse is the same. So some of the subjects we're going to be talking about today is to stall or not to stall, feeding schedules, and blanketing. These are the 3 things that you will see people get into very heated, arguments online about.
That's actually how I know when it's winter, is when the blanket or not blanket arguments come out on Facebook.
Yeah, so let's start with that one.
Yeah. So this is one that I find probably one of the most divisive topics in the horse community. And it's actually the thing even though I joked about using it as my tell of when winter's here, I despise this argument more than anything. And essentially the argument is, do you blanket your horses? And if you do, when do you blanket your horses? I personally am I prefer not to blanket unless it's really necessary. And I'm talking, teens, the temperature down in the teens, precipitation. And there's obviously, nuances to this. If you have a horse that doesn't have a coat in the winter, or you have a very old, fragile horse, you obviously have to use your brain here. But there are people in this camp that I see the argument, if you need a coat, they need a coat. And it just drives me up a wall to see that.
And, we've had people come at us and say, I drove past the farm. I didn't see blankets on your horses. And we always try to explain that we treat each horse as an individual. Yeah. And we look at what their needs are. It's not just an automatic thing for us. It's not like once the temperature hits 30 degrees, we automatically start blanketing. For us, it's an individual thing. So for Willie, for example, Willie is older. He's almost 30 years of age. And even though he does get a good coat on him, he does get cold faster. And our other old horse, Cash, does not quite get the thick coat on him that he used to. So he does get colder a little faster. So we will blanket him sooner than we do the others. But then you have a horse like Kaya, the Frisian, or even Titan, the half Frisian. They don't like blankets. They stay warm. We do not blanket them until it gets down to low 20s. If you try to blanket them before that, they really get very antsy and agitated about it. So we've learned each horse's personality and what their coats are, and we go from there. So for us, it's based on the horse, what their cues are, what they're telling us. And also, of course, we work with our vets to determine their body condition, if they're thinner, or if it's a new horse that's come into us that's thinner, we'll blanket because they just don't have as much fat on them. But this is a huge argument in the horse industry.
Yeah, I think in the wintertime, if it wasn't arguing about when people should and shouldn't blanket, I think horse people might not have anything else to do on the internet.
Yeah, it's a huge controversy. And then, of course, it's not just about blanketing, it's also a question of how heavy do you blanket?
Oh, yes.
Yes, because then you've got lightweight, midweight, heavyweight, and when do you switch those out? And then there's the controversy of do you do neck attachments or no neck attachments? And do you add like the slinkies underneath to keep their coats smooth? So it's not just one thing, it's a lot of things that people can get very divisive on about this subject.
Yeah, and this is like most of the topics we're going to talk about here. It really just comes down to your personal preference. I know people love to provide free advice on Facebook, online, on this topic, but it really just comes down to use your common sense, understand your horse, and try to be kind. I know this is a theme we pulled on in the very first episode, but try to be kind to others. Other people are doing what they think is right for their animals, and they're using their common sense, and they're doing what they think their horse needs.
And I think that's something that we try to educate people on is when we're asked about it, because we do get a lot of questions from obviously adopters and just general public. We always do try to express the fact that it's an individual thing. Obviously, work with your veterinarian, make sure that your horse's body condition is a good score, and then watch your horse. I mean, look for signs. If they are shivering, obviously you're going to put a blanket on them sooner than maybe you might another horse, but common sense, go from there. There are guidelines that veterinarian colleges will put out. So those are available online. But again, use your common sense. But yes, blanketing is one of those extremely controversial subjects in the horse world. Yeah. And then, of course, it's also down to, just the blanket qualities as well, too. There's cheaper ones and more expensive ones. But again, preference, do what you think is best. So the next subject is also one that is highly debated in the horse world. And it's also between people that show horses versus people that do not show horses. And this is whether you stall horses during the day and let them out at night. Now that flips during obviously summer, winter time frame, depending on the light and everything. But a lot of people still believe that you should bring your horse in during the hottest time of the day and stall them during the day and let them out at night. And this has caused I've seen some absolutely wicked fights about this subject. And again, I think it depends. This is my opinion. This depends on what you're doing with your horse. If you have a show horse and this horse is in competition, body clipped, and you obviously need to be looking pristine on show days, then I can understand the validity of keeping your horse stalled. But if your horse isn't necessarily in that category, then maybe stalling them isn't the right option. But again, it depends on your horse. Our pony, for example, Scout, we bring in for feeding and then they go back out. If we do not let Scout out right after he finishes eating, he will paw and paw and paw and paw. He hates to be in a stall. The few times we've had to bring him in because of really bad inclement weather, he hates it and is very agitated, gets very upset, paws at the door. Even though we've tried all sorts of tricks about giving him entertainment in his stall and giving him, of course, hay, he just isn't happy being in a stall. That just isn't his thing. So you have to look at your horses and make the evaluation about what you're going to do. But some people are very, very persistent about what they think about this.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we take into account here as a rescue is most of our horses are geriatric. And just like human beings, just like elderly people, moving around is actually really good for them. And so that's the other reason that we tend to prefer turning ours out full time. They come in the morning to eat breakfast, they go back out. They come in the evening to eat dinner, they go back out. Obviously, with inclement weather in mind, severely inclement weather.
Right, because they do have shelters.
Yeah, they do have shelters in the pastures, but just like anybody else, if they're constantly using those joints, if they're moving around to graze, if they're walking to get water, if they're playing with each other, they're moving, they're keeping their joints in good condition, and they're keeping their overall bodies in good condition.
And we obviously work with vets in order to do assessments with our horses, and we always ask these questions like, is it still good for them to be outside? Is it still good for them to be turned out? And overall, our vets have always told us that it is very good to keep the older horses moving. So that's what we try to do. And that's our preference, but we understand that everyone's needs are different, and some places stall between daylight hours and don't turn out until nighttime. Again, I don't know that there's any right or wrong answer to this. I think it all comes down to preference and then literally what you're doing with your horse. But I have seen, and I know you and I have talked about this, some really knockout, drag out arguments on specifically social media about this particular topic. And I understand that people are very passionate about their horses and very passionate about what their beliefs are, but we just have to, I think, have some grace about understanding that not everyone, is in the same situation and their needs might be different.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about this earlier, and I think I like the phrase different courses for different horses, right?
Yeah.
And it really just comes down to what your preferences are. Obviously keeping them in a stall means having to muck that stall multiple times a day, so that it's clean and they're not standing in filth. So you have to take those kinds of things into consideration. But for us, the right answer is to turn these geriatric horses out, let them walk around, let them keep moving, and basically live their best life out in the pasture.
Yeah. So the other topic is feeding schedules, and this is also a really big one. So I think everyone agrees that, and even for humans, they say that if we eat smaller meals more times during the day, it's better for our digestive system. And horses are not any different. But the reality is most of us work full-time jobs, and we're not around during the day necessarily to feed our horse 3 to 4 times a day. So for most people, unless you're, boarding your horse and you can make those arrangements, most of us have, jobs that we go to. So we're feeding on average just twice a day, morning and night. But there's a big controversy about timing. Yeah. That it must be done at the same time every day without fail. Now, my mother fell into this category. She would never do anything that was around the times that she had to feed. Those horses were fed at the exact same time every morning and the exact same time every night. And she did not deviate from that at all. And I think you and I are a little more flexible in that. We tend to shift our feeding schedule, especially in the summertime. We have noticed that our horses don't tend to like to eat in the hottest time of the day. So where in the wintertime, we might feed around 4:30, 5 o'clock, just as the sun is going down, we may push that out a little bit in the summertime to feed about 6:30, maybe even 7, when it gets a little cooler outside, because the horses seem more apt to eating for that. So again, we take our cues from the horses and what works best for them. But there are some people that believe that feeding schedule must be at the exact same time every day.
Yeah, and for some people that do have a full-time job, as part of their morning routine, they have to feed their animals. So if you have to be at work at a very specific time, you're probably going to fall into a very regimented, rigid schedule because you have a set of things that must be done before you leave for work. And for some people, that's the system that they need. For us, we have the benefit of, even though we do have full-time jobs, we work from home. So we have a bit more flexibility. And I have also found, and people that are on a very rigid schedule may not be able to avoid this, but I have found Chance is a really good example. I made some recent videos about how pushy and demanding he can get when it's breakfast time. As soon as I walk in the barn, he is, grumbling at me. He's pacing his stall. He's telling me, feed me now. I want my food. And this can happen when you get your horse on a very exacting schedule. And if you're 5 minutes late, that horse is frustrated at you. It expects its breakfast or its dinner, and you're tardy. And so I have found that by even mixing this up by a half hour here and there, 45 minutes sometimes, reprioritizing when I come out here, it doesn't allow them to get into the habit of demanding food from me at 6:30. And as Wendy mentioned, we do shuffle this as the seasons change as well. So for us, this is what really works. And again, this is just...
But now our horses do have access to a pasture all the time. So they do have grazing. And even our donkeys that are on a dry lot, they have access to hay all the time.
Sure. So
it's not like they're without food during this this period. So the horses do have forage available all the time.
Right. And, and that's an even bigger reason not to allow them to be pushy for grain. They're not starving. They are in no way, malnourished or anything like that. And so we're just not going to tolerate the bad behavior of a horse demanding its dinner from me, the minute I walk into a barn or something. So, these are just things to look out for. And again, use your common sense, use what works for you. Every situation is different, and every horse has its own course.
I think whether you're new to horses or whether you've been in the industry for a long time, it really comes down to looking at your individuality, what your horse's needs are. And that goes for blanketing, food, turnout time, all of it. And how that works, it just really comes down to what works for your horse. I said this before on one of our previous podcasts. It's kind of like raising children. What you did with one child doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work on the second child. And having a barn full of horses, and especially rescue horses, because some of the horses do come from abusive or neglectful situations. So we have to take their needs into consideration based on what their trauma has been in the past. Yeah. And so we have to really look at those individual cases and really get to know what works for that particular horse. And of course, our vets, our equine dentists, our farriers are so instrumental in what we do. We rely on them to help us make assessments and determine what's really in the best interest of the horse. And then we adjust accordingly. And that adjustment can be, week to week, month to month, year to year. It can be completely flexible.
Yeah, and I think my closing thought on this would just be, just remember to have grace and empathy for other people. Everybody's doing their best, especially, keyboard warriors on Facebook. Before you flame some poor person who doesn't do something exactly the way you do it. As I've mentioned this before, there's very few things in this world. There's almost nothing in the horse world that is only done a single way.
Yeah.
And I think that, if you can remember that, give people the benefit of the doubt, we can maybe save some hurt feelings and some Facebook wars this coming season. If people ask for advice, feel free to share it. But, remember that everybody's doing their best, doing what they can. And, we should all, just try to be good, be friendly, be nice.
So one of the things that we'd love to hear from you guys, or what are some of the other big controversies that you guys have gotten involved in, especially if you do own horses? Like, what are some of the other ones besides timing of feeding, turning out, stalling, those things that we talked about? What are some of the other things you think are big controversies that cause a lot of discourse, specifically online, that maybe you've encountered? And we'd love to hear that from you guys.
Yep, drop a comment down below. And if you haven't done this already, again, this is episode 5. Please go back and watch episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Smash that subscribe button, like this episode, share this on whatever platform you're seeing this on, and help us get the word out there that we're doing this, and so more people can see this. But we would love to hear your comments, love to hear your feedback. You guys have been so supportive and watching the show and giving us positive feedback for everything. So we really appreciate that. And I think this takes us to the end of episode 5.
It does.
And we look forward to seeing you again next week. So cheers to another successful episode.
You gonna take that whole thing?
Yep. Stay cool, everybody.